Hello everyone, my name is Akankshu Nani, and welcome to my YouTube channel NeuroChat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism spectrum disorder, and more. On the channel, I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists, seeking their views and updates on their latest work, research, etc. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Mr. Arman Ali is a prominent disability rights advocate dedicated to advancing the inclusion and empowerment of individuals with disabilities. He has been instrumental in promoting accessibility, inclusion, and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities in India. Arman Ali is known for his work as the executive director of the National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People, NCPEDP, where he has tirelessly championed policies and practices that ensure the rights of people with disabilities are upheld in education, employment, and public spaces. His efforts have significantly impacted the lives of many, fostering a more inclusive society. Mr. Ali, welcome and thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you so much, Akash. Thank you for having me here.
And to jump right into it, could you share your personal journey and what inspired you to become an advocate for disability rights?
About me, I'm Arman. I come from the northeastern part of India and come from a huge family of six brothers. And I have a disability by birth. I have a developmental disability, cerebral palsy. And I don't know how I got into this. Back in 1998, I got a national award for being the best self-employed youth by the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and that kind of introduced me to disability and people with disability, and I figured out that it's a social issue. And then I started looking myself also from that identity of a person with disability and the kind of challenges I faced. And it took me a little while to understand that these challenges I face, the barriers I face, is not because of my disability. It's because of the environment, built environment, and not keeping in mind the needs of disabled people, whether you wanted to use a public transport or any public space, whether private or going to any restaurants, cinema, banks, school, colleges, everywhere. And that's how slowly, when I experienced all these barriers myself, I started looking it from a different edge, and start volunteering with the non-profits in my city. And just, I don't know how I just started advocacy on a full-time basis. It just happens to you. I think you don't plan. It's nothing that I planned to do what I am doing right.
That's amazing. And I wanted to ask about how do you assess the current state of disability rights in India and what areas in your view need the immediate or most attention?
I think we have moved ahead the last 2 decades. A lot has happened in India. I think Indian disability movement is it quite it's maturing with time, and the young people with disability are able to articulate their problems and their thoughts. The COVID hit the disability sector very hard, and it kind of lost the seat on the table. The current issues, I think there are many. I think education remains a challenge, employment, and accessibility. These are the broad three areas that we need to look at. But health and health insurance for people with disability is a major issue. I think there is an acute lack of awareness about persons with disability, people with intellectual disability, people with developmental disability, invisible disabilities, blood disorders, mental health uh, remains even furthermore marginalized. So I think there's a need to engage with people at all level, the policymakers at all level. I would particularly like to highlight here that insurance for people with disability is very difficult. The government of India has a scheme for all, like Ayushman Bharat, which covers people with who come from the weaker economic section of the society. Recently, it has also offered the same scheme to all uh, individuals over the age of 70, irrespective of their of their economic status. Um, However, when you look at disabled people, they are not able to get health insurance. But particularly if you go to a private health insurance company, they refuse, reject with various reasons. And even if you manage to get an insurance, it is a much higher premium than than a non-disabled person. So which makes insurance not affordable for disabled people. And post the pandemic and health, I think, we also say that an average Indian is one hospitalization away from bankruptcy. And imagine the plight of people with disability who already have a health issue. If they have a health issue with a disability, the family, really suffers into this vicious cycle of disability and poverty. So for now, I think as at NCPEDP, we're quite focused on, trying to get insurance for people with disability, something run on in lines with Ayushman Bharat, where disabled people would. I'm running currently doing a survey to understand the deeper the challenges the people with disability and the family members are facing. So this is what we are doing into it, and post that, I think political participation of disabled people is very crucial. I think disability is a political issue. I think that's how I see disability in the present context, and that has a history also, I think. And the third and the most important thing is about data around disability. It's very important that you have disaggregated data where you know the numbers, and so that you can plan it more, with the scheme of things and not as an afterthought.
Thank you. And cultural stigmas around disability remain a significant challenge. So, how do you approach changing societal attitudes, especially in regions where disabilities are still seen as like taboo or a burden?
So I think the onus lies on people with disability and their family members. I think if you have to, you just cannot hide your disability with some excuse. You have to own your identity and not become a beneficiary where you are asking people to be kind and compassionate to you for your disability. You need to kind of play a leadership role. I think rights of people with disability is the only way forward, where you want to be part of the development of any country or any system, then and charity or welfare. I think everybody needs kindness, irrespective of your disability, caste, creed, religion, race, nationality, economics. Everybody needs kindness. But I think people with disability somehow fail to assert their identity, and that's how the stigma takes over. And when you say that, no, 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 I have a health issue, I don't have a disability. So I think that's where we are lagging. And if people with disability understands the identity politics, that will be great.
And so, in your work, have you encountered resistance from families or communities regarding the integration of people with disabilities?
So there is, that the divisibility is a diverse issue. And it's a huge spectrum. You look at different kind of disabilities. Are different. They are coming from all. The intersectionality of disability. It's coming from everywhere. As I mentioned, it cuts across all demographics and any other parameter that you look at. And then you try to bring them together on a particular issue in terms of rights. It's a challenge, and the acute lack of awareness about disability rights and disability per se, it makes it even more difficult. So there is a resistance where you think, people with disability have special abilities, the people with disability are differently abled, and so on and so forth. So it kind of takes away the discourse to a different direction, which kind of further marginalized disabled people.
And what role has the government played so far in promoting disability inclusion? And what
No,
policy
I think,
changes do you think?
yeah, I see. India has one of the first country to sign the UNCRPD. Like United States has not signed the UNCRPD yet. We have a very progressive law, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016. It's a game changer. It's very progressive. It takes care of people with disability from a very rights point of view. Whether it is education or employment, transport, services, products, non-discrimination, it takes care of everything. So I think moved ahead, and it's quite forward-looking law, which is almost 8 years now that it is in place. But the challenge is in its implementation. So you don't see it implemented by by the governments, by private sector, and even people with disabilities are not aware about their rights. So if you don't know about your right, you don't ask, you don't fight for it, it remains a piece of paper. The law remains a piece of paper. But having said that, I think we have moved forward. We have moved ahead. There is a lot of today. The fact that doing this, interview is one of the things that you have come to know about me through whatever channel. That's how that I think India is moving forward. We are making noise, and there are delays. There are different, but issues in getting where we want to be. But the government of India, the union government, is definitely done a lot in terms of uh, disability to bring it to the forefront, at least in terms of visibility.
So you just answered my next question, but in like the gap that you mentioned between the policy and like its actual implementation. So how do you hold stakeholders accountable, and how do you like, I guess, spread more awareness about those
So,
rights?
so we have a national disability network where we have partners across the country from all categories of disability, and we meet as and when possible any ongoing discourse in the country. We try to find disability gaps and work with the government and other stakeholders to kind of plug those gaps and move. So the continuous interaction between the government and also our partners across the country, where we have a strong network, it kind of keeps the balance, and we know what's happening on the ground, and also kind of keep this exchange going on.
And what are the biggest challenges faced by people with disabilities in accessing education and employment? And what strategies do you have there?
I think accessibility is the biggest challenge. If you look at accessibility, just a ramp, then you fail disabled people. For employment and access and education, both cannot happen without accessibility. And accessibility is not just a ramp or accessible toilet in the school or office. The entire ecosystem, like the transport, the policies that you have, the curriculum, the teachers, your other employees, the CEO, the government, and so I think the entire ecosystem has to look at disabled people as a strong participant of this market, or the section that you look at as a liability is also a consumer. So I think if you look at education and employment, and if you look at without complete accessibility, whether it is physical, digital, or information infrastructure, which is taking along needs of disabled people, not just the blind, deaf, and the locomotor disabled people, but everybody, irrespective of the kind of disability become, it should take along everyone. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, when it comes to education and employment.
How can we kind of improve that accessibility? Like, what ideas
I
do you
think
have?
disabled people have to kind of take leadership. They have to know their rights. They have to fight for it. They have to ask questions, participate in political discourse, come forward, vote, contest elections at all level. I think that's how it will change.
And are there any success stories from NCPED, NCPEDPs?
NCPEDP has led the disability sector's movement from last 2 decades. So the law which I mentioned is something we led that discourse. So do you see inclusion? Whatever you see in India in terms of disability, in terms of employment, education, we are an advocacy organization. So we do research based advocacy for disabled people's inclusion in everything, and we have a strong partners network where called the National Disability Network. It has led this movement, and we are not a service delivery that we have identified a disabled person, giving him some training and find him an employment. That's not something that we do. So if you look at the Rights of Persons with Disability Act, and under this act, if it has benefited some disabled people, it will be in millions of people who have kind of, if they have benefited through it, then we don't take the credit. It's the credit of the National Disability Network. We have just coordinated, led it, we played the role of a catalyst, and so on.
And looking back on all your years of doing this, is there like a particular moment or case that deeply impacted you or changed the way you approach your
I,
work?
I, I think it's an everyday, there's so much to be done against that you cannot kind of look back and that change. It's just never ending. If you look at the struggle of disabled people, each day you hear a different story, and the struggle never ends. So I just cannot look back and kind of change. So I also struggle at my own level, despite the fact who I lead a strong organization on disability rights. But there, I have my own struggles and so on. So there's a lot of work to be done. So don't have the time to sit and reflect on something which changed me. So it's an ongoing. Every day I come to office. My colleagues come to office with the same enthusiasm to do more.
And like you mentioned earlier, that India and you know a lot done by you and your organization has one of the most I guess progressive inclusivity inclusive legislature for disability rights. So what do you think the global community can learn from India's approach?
I think the disability movement in India, it's quite interesting and diverse, and there's a lot to learn from. And India is an extremely difficult country to navigate in terms of accessibility. It's so diverse, such huge population. The most, the highest population in the world of disabled people lived in India, and in the way you know how India is, it's very most of the part is rural India, and that's also not organized the way it is supposed to be. So disability is never part of a plan or a scheme or on a drawing board. It's always an afterthought. I'm not talking about the ramps and toilets here and there, but the entire system. So, and in that, if we have been able to thrive to get India signed the UNCRPD and then having this law, so I think we've moved forward, and there's a lot need to be learned through this movement that we have in the country. It's not as strong as the US 1970s disability rights movement, which led to ADA. But with different context from a global south point of view, I think there's a lot that India has to offer.
And what advice would you give to young people with disabilities who aspire to advocate for their rights?
I think first know your rights and then demand, ask questions, fight for it.
Mr. Ali, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude for you for taking the time to participate in this interview and for sharing your invaluable insights into disability rights.